I suppose our first topic really should be the little bit of news which you may not have heard. I mean, living in London, it's isolated. You may not have heard.
Absolutely.
We have a general election
Oh, really? When?
about a week ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Okay,
okay,
missed that one.
yeah.
No, no. Last Tuesday week, British Prime Minister Theresa May blindsided the entire Westminster political and media establishment by, at an hour's notice, announcing that she was going to hold a general election in Great Britain when she spent the last 6 months saying there wasn't going to be one.
Yes,
And
yes.
ever since then, it's been complete mayhem in the media.
And do they love
Opinion
it?
polls coming out of your ears, and to which I'm sure we're going to talk a bit in a minute about the one that we added to the general fun and jollity.
Hmm.
And everybody's, well, a cynical colleague of mine from the States. We were discussing this the other day, and we came to the conclusion that maybe it was the latest round in the international electoral stupid cup, just to see how stupid electorates can be. Because since we've had in the last year, we've had Brexit and Donald Trump and Marine Le Pen as runner-up in the French elections.
Of course,
Who's going to predict anything?
of course, we don't want to alienate anyone who's watching. But shall we say surprising cup then? The cup of surprising politics.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I was simply quoting. I was not making any kind of value
Okay,
judgments.
okay. Just wanted to make sure. Just wanted to make sure. Trump supporters are welcome here.
Absolutely.
Now, now, I suppose what I would say is that this is a bit of a surprise, but crucially, the reason why we're talking about it, this isn't just because we don't just talk about politics for the sake of it.
Yeah.
One of the big questions here is what impact it's going to have on archaeology and heritage and related subjects, and in that I include, for example, culture, provisions for the storage, archiving, and general care of historic sites, monuments, and artifacts, so on and so forth. A whole raft of ideas and questions, which frankly wasn't really addressed in the previous general election in 2015. I'll put a link below to, I think it's is it the Heritage Alliance? I think they did a very good independent analysis of the different parties' manifestos. And last time, heritage wasn't really very well catered for. Before we dive into the wonderful work you've done, I suppose what's your instinct on this? Do you think in a 6 week campaign there's enough room for people to talk about archaeology?
I think getting archaeology specifically talked about is very difficult. The media agenda is very clear.
Yeah.
And archaeology and heritage come very well down the list, particularly because your average TV and newspaper journalist isn't particularly well briefed on the subject. You do get a few who are informed, who are specifically interested, but again, when you're trying to address the general audience on a mainstream news program or on a mainstream newspaper, it's you're not going to go for the more niche subjects. At the same time, I think that issues such as the environment and certain heritage stories that are nationally and even internationally important, like, for example, transport and Stonehenge,
Mm, mm.
are likely to figure in some form or other, either locally, because in the UK, for people that aren't aware, we have a constituency-based system whereby we elect members of parliament on a constituency basis linked to a specific geographical location. So if
Yeah.
you've got an MP elected for an area which has a major heritage asset or a heritage story that is breaking, then in that local campaign it's more likely to be noted than maybe in the general run of national commentary.
Hmm. But unless I suppose it would be fair to say or to characterise, I guess, the general political dialogue when it comes to heritage, and I suppose we should try to use that term instead of just archaeology heritage.
Yes, definitely.
The political dialogue tends to be around tinkering with planning policy, essentially aiding business and economic growth, or it tends to be in the form of trying to make the case for making it someone else's problem, bruv, as it were. So the splitting up of English heritage into English heritage and historic England is effectively taking the burden for looking after many monuments in, especially the English region, the burden for looking after that stuff out of the public purse. So
exactly.
On a national conversation, the conversation hasn't been great. And would you like to sort of run us through the snap poll that Pipeline did?
It was very interesting. I mean, we specifically wanted to run a poll just to take the temperature, really, of it's not a scientific sample, but a broadly representative sample of individuals rather than organisations, because Heritage Alliance is polling its membership organisations about what they want to see from the general election campaign and from party manifestos. But to take the temperature within the sector and within people who are interested as members of the public in heritage, what they felt at the beginning of the campaign. We did the polling online in the 3 days following the election announcement. And broadly speaking, it's probably a relatively pessimistic picture. By far, put it this way, the headline figure and the headline we ran with on the story on Pipeline that discussed the results was that only 2% of our sample felt that the election would have a positive outcome for archaeology and heritage. And that is actually really quite sad.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at the results as you displayed very helpfully in a graph or graphs on your website. I'll put a link in the video description below, obviously, so people watching and listening to this can take a look. And as you say, 2% think it will have a largely positive effect. I think what's most disappointing and frankly most telling about the morale of archaeology and heritage-related sectors at the moment is the fact that by far most people thought it would just make no difference. It would have no effect at all. Which is, and I think this is one of the frustrations that I've certainly voiced recently on ARCHAEOLOGY. This is the big shame about this, is that this isn't remotely a priority, and therefore no change is just as likely as a bad change. In that sense, we're just quietly plodding along, doing our thing, and essentially being ignored by politics. And I think that's very, very sad, especially when you consider the fact that so much of our, I suppose, cultural richness comes from how we interact with culture and arts and history, and that's not seen.
And those issues, those factors that are a massive net benefit to the UK economy as a whole, whichever region of the country you look at. Culture and heritage is a net contributor to local economies. Yeah,
and especially frankly with Brexit. Hopefully, hopefully they can't keep ignoring this for too long, because if nothing else, it's a tourist asset. You know, a castle brings people in, and we can't afford to be ignoring people at the moment. In that sense,
I think it's worth saying there as well. I mean, you've mentioned the dreaded B word, and it's actually inescapable. The one of the things that the poll asked was about people's hopes and fears, and we also asked what people felt about particular high-profile issues. And again, a large majority of the contributions of the respondents felt that, for example, maintaining EU environmental legislation post-Brexit, in whatever form Brexit takes place or doesn't take place, and we're still 2 years away from knowing that, maintaining the regime which was that puts the environment at the centre of government planning was very important.
But is it fair to say that the current Parliament isn't really, it's no longer one of their priorities? I understand that Cameron, for example, made the environment a big, he wanted to have the greenest government ever 2 parliaments ago now, I suppose. Is that a bit of a red herring in that sense?
I think green issues come and go in the political consciousness. At the moment, the main green issue that is in the public space is air quality, and particularly air quality vis-a-vis diesel engines in cars, vans and lorries. Climate change is always bubbling along. Specific heritage environment issues tend to come up on a local basis. So when you get an issue like we mentioned earlier, the Stonehenge Tunnel or
the Walsrosby Hill
Sandstredge, then it creeps up the agenda and gets space in the more mainstream media. But broadly speaking, at the moment, it's the issues around, particularly, as I say, pollution and air quality that people are concerned about. And in fact, with Brexit, they're extending that to talking about, well, clean quality of water at beaches and things, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, just to sort of, I suppose, another look at this, especially this graph when it comes to which issues should be raised during the election. Planning policy does come second after EU environmental standards, but then we have archaeology education. I think that's great to see that archaeologists are concerned about that. But again, it does beg this question as to how much this is actually going to float up to the top of the consciousness of those who are having these conversations. Now, just before we dive in there, this I think is linked with another question that you asked here, where 99 people answered, one person skipped. It seems out of 100, and this is with regards to the bodies that represent archaeology on a national level. It seems that for the most part, people want to be provided with information. They want to see information provided into the public realm, but they don't seem to necessarily want that to be political. Now, how do you do that? Do you think? How do you make? Is it possible not to be political when you're talking about, for example, the environment and culture and funding and all this kind of thing?
That is a very good question, and it's a difficult one for particularly managers of charitable bodies are concerned, because if the moment you are covered by charity law, you have to be very careful about work that you do that could be conceived as any kind of political lobbying. So, I mean, I think certainly what people are asking for, it's clear, I think, from the poll. People want information and then to be able to make up their own minds. Having said that, a sizable majority wanted their representative bodies to go on and then to recommend a particular political manifesto. And we didn't ask them to specify which party, just simply they would like to see a party programme endorsed. And roughly the same number of people didn't want their representative bodies to engage with the general election at all. I think that falls into the old category of it's history or archaeology, it's not political. We saw that, we've seen that over many years with issues such as apartheid in sport and the boycott in the 1970s and 1980s of South Africa, where people said, cricket isn't political, therefore it's perfectly okay to go and play sport against a segregated South African team under apartheid. So,
I mean, there are that. I suppose that's one end of that spectrum. But I suppose at the other end, in a very real way, you try and do anything, archaeologically speaking, in anyone's local authority, and you'll very quickly have politics wrapping you up in a nice neat bow. You need permission to dig. You need to have a plan as to what's going to happen to that material. You need to have a proven track record that the local authority accepts and understands. You need to be engaging with politics, even just to do archaeology in that sense.
Oh, indeed, and certainly. Although, I mean, the pipeline has particular, it doesn't endorse parties. It tends to endorse positions, but certainly, and the contacts and the people I've worked with are across the political spectrum, from Conservative through to UKIP, through to Labour, to people who are on the left of the spectrum. So, and I think we have to recognise that, and again, it's clear in the polling, although the sample we give. It is self-identifying, and it is a relatively small one, but it, broadly speaking, fits the picture people might have of archaeology as and heritage as a touchy-feely, broadly left-of-centre community. But at the same time, there was a score for UKIP, which is roughly in line with UKIP's current polling.
Yeah.
So it's a complicated picture, and obviously the important thing is to be inclusive. Try and take, when it comes to archaeology and heritage, it's to be inclusive and try and take everyone along with you. Can I just say one thing as well about the education issue? And I'm pleased that you tied the two together. The polling came right on top also of Dr. Dan Boatwright effectively admitting defeat over his brilliant campaign to try and get AQA and the government to retain archaeology A-level. There we had over 13,000 respondents on the online petition. It went to, there were meetings with ministers and so on, and absolutely nothing has happened. It's gone.
Yeah.
And I think the jury is out on how serious that effect will be. But I think that's one of the things that maybe people had in mind and in fact, some people specifically mentioned archaeology A-level in their broader responses.
Yeah.
So we at the beginning of the General Election Act campaign, we have a marker really on these actually quite serious situation archaeology education is in.
Yeah, okay. Well, I suppose just as a final little roundup of that, it's worthwhile saying that, yes, you're right, this isn't a population representative sample, because broadly speaking, the people who volunteered to do this did it via Facebook groups that have a vested interest in archaeology already. But actually what you've got here is a very interesting starting point for measuring how archaeology feels about it, and also frankly what we expect to happen next. And I suppose now it's up to us to try and make sure that things aren't quite as bleak or aren't quite as ignored perhaps as they might be. So I suppose maybe we should just end very quickly just on a note of get involved, try and put this on the agenda at local hustings, bring up your local archaeological site, mention what your concerns are, and ensure that at the very least, even just on a local level, questions are being asked and answered, I think.
Absolutely, and I can also say that on the pipeline we will be doing follow-up polls through the election campaign to see if people's attitudes change as we go forward through the next 5-6 weeks.
Okay.
And afterwards, actually, when we know the final result.
Excellent. Well, in that case, we may even make a couple of one-off little mini specials about that in the next couple of weeks. So let's see how it goes, I suppose.